Today, we're going to jump straight into ranking study methods. I talk a lot on this channel about the different study methods, and I always say engagement creates learning. So we're going to focus on how curiosity and engagement can better your learning. And what I'm talking about here is time-efficient study methods. Use your time as optimally as you can for your studying and for your learning, because then it allows you to learn more and engage in more activities. So the first one on the list is reading the textbook. I'm going to put this in a solid C tier. And I put it there because it really depends on the textbook. Some textbooks provide very good examples, but some get really wordy and don't have enough diagrams, pictures, walkthroughs, practice problems. And so it can be a good use of time, but sometimes it's not. I will say going through a textbook or at least a section and sort of taking some notes ahead of class can be helpful, because then when you hear it in class, it'll be the second time and you're a little more familiar. So that's why I'd put it in the C. But again, if you have a poor textbook, it can take a lot of time to read through entire sections and you may not get a ton out of it. Next, we're going to go with rewatching lectures. I'm going to put this one all the way down in F tier. The reason is because it just takes so much time. You literally are spending double class time. You're not engaging it with it in a new way most of the time. You're not really hearing anything new. You're not having it re-explained differently. It's just a direct repetition of exactly what you've done, and it takes quite a lot of time. Now, I know some people will rewatch lectures at 1.5 or 2 times speed and then try to compare it with their notes. I still kind of caution against, because I feel like at that point, your brain slows down how much it can really process of what your teacher is speaking when it's so fast. But again, they're not sharing anything new. So it's a very, very time inefficient method, and therefore F tier. The next one is studying with friends, and this is testing each other. So this would be quizzing each other, playing games together, anything like that. This is going to be an A tier method, and this is one of the highest engagement study methods there are. The reason is because you're adding a social component. And social components tend to make things more memorable. You're adding generally a competitive component, especially if you're quizzing each other and keeping score. And that creates emotional attachment to the answers. And then the third thing is that when you are the one testing, you can often try to give them hints and ask your friends questions in ways without giving the answer that makes you think about it in a new way. Having to come up with test questions, essentially, make sure that you understand the material at the same time. Trying homework without help. I'm going to put this as a solid B tier, because again, it's a little bit dependent on what kind of homework you have. Most of the time, though, I find trying it first without help can often make those little moments where it really clicks more and more beneficial. Because when someone just walks you through it, it's harder to do it alone the next time. But if you were stuck in a problem for a few minutes and you're working and finally it snaps and you get it, that moment and that process that you just learned is a lot easier to take with you onto an exam because you did it yourself. Next up, office hours. I think you all know on this channel by now, A tier, absolutely. Your professors are literally professionals in their field. They spent years studying what they're teaching you, and they're offering you time with them, either one-on-one or in smaller groups, for free, where you can ask tailored questions. That is such a high-value activity. Go to office hours. Next one, flashcards. Flashcards I'm going to put down in D, because there are some subjects where you're just straight memorizing words, and so of course they're going to be great for that, but they never really help you beyond straight memorization of words. That's exactly the problem with them. Most of the time, flashcards are not going to be beneficial for really digging into mechanisms, problem solving, things like that. Practice tests, B tier. A good practice test is one that you take all the way through honestly. And that's a really important component of this. Don't take a practice test and go problem by problem and look at the answer. Take a practice test all the way through and actually score yourself. Then go back and make sure you understand every problem that you got wrong. Very high engagement because you're scoring, and very, very time efficient generally. Next, we're going to go with teach someone random. I'm also going to put that in the B tier. So this is teaching someone who's not necessarily in your class or studying, like up here. This is teaching someone else. Teach your roommate, teach your mom, teach your friend who's in a different major. This can be really helpful because sometimes they're going to ask really basic questions because they don't have a knowledge base in the field that you're teaching. And that makes you really think and make sure you can understand what's really going on and explain it very simply. So that's actually a very beneficial step. The only reason I didn't put it as A tier is that sometimes you get people that are really good at that and they really engage, and sometimes you get people that are so lost that they kind of just say okay, and then you don't get too much out of presenting. However, the presentation itself often makes you aware of what you're missing. Next, trying to draw a diagram from memory. That is also going to go in B tier. Drawing diagrams from memory is a great way of understanding molecular mechanisms, understanding systems, everything like that. Diagrams generally make more sense than words. I've heard a lot of people say, I'm a visual learner, as if that's a unique thing. Most people learn better through visuals than just through words. That's a pretty well studied thing. You tend to learn more the more levels of engagement you have, which is why I always say engagement creates learning. So what you see or read with words, what you see in pictures and diagrams, and what you hear all together are going to increase learning quite a lot. Now, if you add a component where you add attachment or physically act it out, like hands-on learning, you're probably going to learn even more. So diagrams are a really important step from that. And this is kind of like trying homework without help, which is why I put it in the same vein. It's helpful to a point because you can, draw the diagram, really force yourself to think about what you actually know. But there's often a point where you get stuck and then have to look at the textbook anyway. And then after that, you're kind of doing straight memorization. Next one, videos. Now, I'm actually going to put videos pretty high. And the reason is that if you get a good video, you get time efficiency. So I'm also going to put these in B tier. It's video dependent. Some take a long time and they're just someone going through a lecture. But there have been instances where I watched a 15-minute physics video where this guy walked us through some diagrams and it was really active and engaged. His name was Parth G, if you want to check it out. And I learned more in a 15-minute video than I did in like an hour and a half or 2 hours of textbook readings. It suddenly made it make so much more sense because you can see it, and he walked through it and he had it really well done. As I said, there's some videos where people are just going to take you through their lectures. So that's what I would caution against. That's why this is not an A tier, because some are not time efficient. But if you can find good, shortened, time efficient videos, videos are often very, very helpful. Next one, AI explanations. I'm going to put this all the way down in D tier. The reason AI is down here is because sometimes it's hard to get it to understand what your professor is asking, especially if your professor writes his or her own questions and doesn't take them from, a common bank online. And so you can lose time there. Also, I have seen AI be wrong, especially when you get into upper level courses. And then the third thing is that when it just spits everything out to you, even when it's right, sometimes it's too easy and too tempting to just copy down what it does and not really understand what's going on. So that's why I would caution against them a little bit. They're useful as a last resort, absolutely. And they are very useful for when you're stuck, especially on like a deep STEM problem that is in a well-studied field. Next up, engaged classroom time. I think A tier. Engaged classroom time is similar to office hours, and it's one of the highest, grossing output, time efficient study methods. The reason, again, you're with a professor who's a professional in the field, just like office hours. It's not quite the same thing in that it's more people, but you can take advantage of that. If you're to ask a question in office hours, that's not very scary because it's probably just you and the professor and maybe one or two more students. But a lot of students find it scary to ask questions in class. You're in a class of 200 people and raising your hand, ooh, that can be a little bit scary, especially if you're not used to it, and it really can. If you can overcome that and ask your question, what you just told your brain is that piece of information that you wanted to know was so important that you are willing to overcome your fear of public embarrassment and raise your hand and ask a question. That creates a substantial, an amazing amount of attachment to whatever you just asked. I can guarantee you're going to remember more what you asked about during class than what you just sat passively and watched. Next, we have studying with friends teaching each other. Also A tier. Same thing as studying with friends testing each other. You get social component, you get memorability component, and they say you don't know something unless you can teach it. Oftentimes, trying to teach someone something new, make sure you really understand it step by step. Teaching other people is a great way of learning yourself, and doing this with friends in your class can be more helpful than someone random. So A tier. Next up, rereading notes. This I would put somewhere between D and F, to be honest, because it depends. I'm going to put an F because what I mean by this is just strictly rereading through your entire section of notes, similar to rewatching lectures. It takes a lot of time and there's no new information presented and you're not engaging with it in a new way. Now, if you were going to do something like right after a lecture, write down a summary sheet and take new notes without looking at the book or the slides or whatever, just off memory, and then comparing that to your old notes and correcting it, that would be a really high engagement activity. I would move that up to B or C. But if you're talking about just sort of passively filtering back through your notes, F tier activity. I will note here as well, rereading your notes is useful when you're doing a practice problem. So if you're in the middle of a practice problem, or a homework problem, and you get stuck, then you want to flip back to your notes to look at the similar example your professor did, and then use that to try to figure out how to do the problem. Absolutely. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about literally just going back through all of your notes in a section passively. And last but certainly not least, we have modeling. This is also going to go in A tier because modeling, again, is creating a different level of engagement. As I said, videos, diagrams, these kind of things are helpful in creating a visual component. You probably heard your professor talking, and then at the same time, you're reading the material maybe through textbooks, maybe through, flashcards, whatever, or just the lecture slides themselves. But creating a physical level of modeling or being able to do something in 3D is a whole different level. This is where we get into hands-on learning. So lab experiments, I would count as a form of modeling. A story from my life here, I took an anatomy course and I probably learned 80% of the course, including the lecture section, just in the lab. Being able to actually sit there with the plastic models of, muscles and arteries and veins and all of that, and see in 3D where all of these components lie and how they fit together and what they're going to do was way more beneficial for me than muscle tables or looking at charts or rereading lecture slides, because you can hold it, touch it, move it around physically, manipulate the object and understand it in 3D. And that's particularly useful, as I made another video about, in courses that require 3D rotation and movement in your head. So chemistry modeling can be very helpful, molecular models. Anatomy, using the plastic models. Physics, lab experiments, being able to see things, also very helpful. This is one of the reasons why they have labs in a lot of STEM courses, but I think if you can do it on your own as well, or at least find a way to add a component or spend extra time in the lab and ask your professor questions, that is a very high yield activity. So that concludes this video on ranking study tier methods. I hope you all learned something here, and I hope you can go apply this to your life. Start studying efficiently, maximize the output of your time. This is ProGainKnowledge. I'll see you all later.